All right, do you guys have any questions? No questions? Come on. Jamie, no questions? Where's Susie? There's Susie. All right, Susie. Any questions, Susie? You sure? Where's Brad?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
So if finance folks aren't good at project management, when you find one who is good at project management, are they worth a lot more than just a normal finance person?
Absolutely. By the way, I can tell you the same thing for engineers and same thing for programmers. I mean, they're few and rare. And so having the ability, besides the technical understanding, yep, absolutely.
There you
So
go.
are you going to ask for a raise now, Brad?
Gratuitous plug for you. No, I don't have to ask. No, that's okay.
Brad, you're the classic, you know, the A students work for the B students.
All right, any other questions so far? Okay, we're not going to get to our exercise today, which is fine because we're still on track. But I do want to cover this next section and then want to have a conversation about things. Okay, so no one has any questions about what we've covered so far? Does it all sound familiar to you in some form or another?
One quick thing, Jess. This is for everybody on the call. Part of what we do a lot of the time is actually set some ground rules around when we work with individuals. There's no hierarchy on this call. So if you happen to be on this call with, say, your supervisor, your manager, or the owner of the business, don't hesitate to ask questions that may reflect on your business or may, quote unquote, be a partly political or tough to talk about within the business, no matter who's on the call, because the root of that has a lot of issues in it that we can actually help out with, and it actually drives a lot of really good conversations in helping you out. So if you're wondering whether you should or shouldn't say anything or ask a certain question, just ask it. 90% of the time, that leads to a great conversation and everyone benefits from it. So don't hesitate to ask any questions.
All right. Let's go on to the next piece. Let's talk about the life cycle of a project. So regardless of size of project, every project has a life cycle. Because remember, what's the definition of a project? Yeah, this is your first quiz. What's the definition of a project? You guys remember?
Something with a defined start and finish date.
That is correct. So a project always has a beginning and always has an end, which means there's a cycle, right? There's a start and there's an end. And regardless of size, whether I'm cooking dinner or I'm building a railroad, right? I'm going to have a start and a finish, and I'm going to have the same cycle steps regardless. Durations may be long. So the life cycle of a project starts with there's an initiation phase, there's a planning phase, there's an execution phase, there is a control phase, and there is a closeout. Every project, regardless of size, and again, if you want to take the smallest, as I say, look at cooking dinner, right? The initiation is, what are we having for dinner? All right, once we decide what we're having dinner, we plan, okay, here are the ingredients we're going to use, right? So we plan what the dinner is going to be. Then we go cook it, right? And then as we're cooking it, we're controlling. The execution is we're controlling it. And closeout is, like I said, when you serve dinner. And that's the shortest duration, right? Same thing with any large project. There is the initiation, right? Establishing the expectations, establishing the goals, the objectives, right? The planning is planning how you're going to do the work. The execution is executing the work plan, the plan that was developed, and the control is, again, is adjusting as the execution is taking place, and the closeout is formal acceptance. So what that looks like, within each one of those phases, we have several steps that occur. In the initiation, we have the startup. Now, for the purpose of this class, we're not, typically where startup starts is at the proposal level of proposing a particular project. We're not starting at that point for the purpose of this class. We're starting at the point that the proposal, the upstream discussions have already been defined and a decision has been made to move forward with a particular project, and we're starting at that point, which is the initial handoff project, at the point of identifying a project manager and performing the handoff, and then the creation of the initial steps of the project. So we have initiate, planning, and under planning, we really have two major activities that occur, and that is defining the scope and the requirements of the project, and defining the first pass at planning and resource allocation. This is the initial, because we'll do more in depth when we get into scheduling. The execution and control basically is once the plan is defined, we go out and execute it. So we're tracking it, we're reporting out on it, we're evaluating, reviewing and evaluating, and making any minor adjustments. Here's a key part of this. Execution does not equate to replanning the entire project. You need to plan the project. 80% of the project needs to be planned up front during the planning phase. Execution should be strictly adjusting, not replanning. We often find, we have run into clients that what they do is they do very little planning up front, and they do planning as they're doing the work. And that is not planning. And so that's a big impact to time and cost. And then the whole issue around risk mitigation is that's when you get hit with these, something goes wrong completely and you're shut down, and then you're in trouble. And so you really need to do the planning. Again, in each one of these phases, the planning phase is 60–80% of the time a project manager should be spent in planning, should be in the planning phase, not in the execution phase. And then the last phase is the closeout, and this is doing the completion of the assessment, lessons learned, and ensuring that whatever you identify as the good, the bad, and the ugly, and especially the bad and the ugly, end up feeding the next project. Okay? This is how we learn and improve our projects. But if we don't do that, again, there are a lot of companies that have great procedures and great policies that every project does an assessment and they do a lessons learned, and then it dies. It doesn't get carried over to the next project. You're wasting time at that point. Why are you doing it? It has to be carried over. For this entire project, we're going to be doing, for every single phase, we're going to do risk and issue management across the board. We're going to be communicating. We're going to be working with our sponsor and our customer across this entire cycle. Communication with the teams, with our peers, up to management, across every phase of the life cycle. Okay? That's why you see this down here. This is constant. So to give you an idea how this is going to work in the class. So you're going to, when you get together as a team, you're going to decide, so I've asked each of you to come with a project. You as a team are going to decide what project you're going to do. And you're going to assign a project manager. The team is going to go through the process of planning the project. At every step that we go through, the team will be required to report, what we call report out, report every phase, because that is what you should be doing on a real project. When we work during the initial phase and complete the initial phase, we should be reporting to our sponsor or to our customer, here's where we are. When we do the scope definition, we're going to report out on that. when we do our planning, at every step of the plan, we're going to report. There should be constant reporting out to ensure, I mean, the whole purpose of communicating is to ensure that your customer, your sponsor, that your planning is on the same page with the expectations of what your customer or your sponsor is thinking, right? Because if we're not, if you do all this planning, you start the execution, and then the sponsor comes out, a customer goes, well, that's not what I wanted, right? And so we need to have that constant communication. So as part of this course, you will be reporting out at every step that we stop and you go do some work on your planning, okay? And it's just, you just need to get into that routine. There's constant communication back and forth, that there's understanding so we avoid, because I can tell you one of the biggest complaints that we always get going into any organization in regards to project management, first problem, poor communication, right? There are a lot of assumptions and it's poor communication. It's always poor communication. And part of it is because there isn't a process to actually communicate. And so we're giving you what we normally do in an organization is the report out, is a standard practice to ensure this communication and understanding. So we're going to start with the startup, the initiation. So the first thing we need to do is the organization needs to commit to the beginning of the project, right? So when a project is identified, we are now as an organization committed to that project. First thing that has to happen is to identify and assign a project leader or a project manager. Who's their person? And this may sound a little odd, but the project leader and manager has to actually be notified. We have walked into organizations, they are identified by management, but somehow they don't get communicated to the individual. It just work shows up on their desk. Okay, so there has to be a communication. Now, we're not going to go through the selection process of how you should select. We do that when we're working with organizations, is we do talk about what is the criteria, how do you do that, and then how do you actually notify them. But the identification and assignment of a project leader and manager is the first step. Once that occurs, then the next step in the initiation is to develop a high-level project plan, what we call a project brief / project charter. Some organizations call it a project brief. It's what we've traditionally have called it. Some organizations call it a project charter. There should be a very high level. This isn't the detailed plan yet. This is at a high level to make sure that at the very least, this is the transfer of information from that to the project manager. So the project manager at a high level has an understanding of what the project is. And so when we look at assigning a project manager, we also need to understand the role of the project manager or project leader. So the project leader, project manager, as a leader, their responsibilities are to organize, coordinate, and direct the project, right, through the life cycle of the project. And that's another thing that we've run into when looking at organizations, is every organization has different roles and responsibility for the project manager. And what's not clear is where in the life cycle their roles and responsibilities actually start. And so part of that early stage that we talked about, having policies and procedures, there's got to be a clear policy and procedure that says the project manager gets selected at the initiation or at the planning stage or wherever that is. But we have seen organizations that they have multiple project managers. They have the project manager at the initiation, a different project manager for the planning, and a different project manager for the execution and control. There's a problem with that because the guy who's doing the execution and control basically gets handed a plan and has no real idea of what thinking went into developing that plan. And what we often see is they take the plan, toss the plan, and create their own. And so you really want to have that flow. Quite frankly, our recommendation is taken as far upstream as possible which in many organizations, they should be part of the estimating sales, the upfront piece, to ensure that we have an understanding of the entire flow. And my own experience at Siemens was that when I first arrived, project managers were not included in the proposal, and that caused a lot of issues. Project managers were being held responsible for things they had zero control over, and that certainly changed. So they ended up being included all the way up at the early proposal stage. And so you just need to look at where do you include project managers. So they should be part of that, and that's part of the leadership piece. They should also be responsible for resolving any conflict between team members, because again, we're going to see conflict. They lead the project to project success. They also should be the primary communicators to the team, primary communicators to the peers, and primary communicators up to either the customer or senior management. They should lead, and I'm going to want to replace that with the word facilitate the development of the project plan by bringing in the right people in the developing of the plan. They should also be entrepreneurs, because they have to be very innovative. When resources do not report to you and work still has to get done, they have to become very resourceful to get the work done. They are also the managers, so they're going to have to manage the plan on a daily basis. So they become operational managers to ensure the execution of the plan. They also become administrators, right? They have to monitor the day in and day out details of the plan. They have to be constantly communicating with folks that are doing work just to understand where their project is. So to understand in the bigger picture, the project manager is the hub for everything related to the project. They should be the primary communicators to either the customer or the top management or the sponsor. So the sponsor is the next one, right? The project sponsor, right? The customer. They should be the primary communicator and interface with the project team. They also should be to third party and suppliers, right? Should be part of the intercommunication, should be involved. And internally, any support groups. Typically, when we talk about support groups, we're talking about IT support or maintenance support. They should be that primary link to all of these. So the project manager becomes the central hub for all the different activities related to the project. So one of the other key things that a project manager needs to understand and know, and this is back to the art piece, is understand team building. Because the project manager, one of the project manager's primary roles is to take their team, and even if the team is only 3 people, they're still responsible to get them through every stage that a team goes through. And these, again, we have a whole class just on team building, but just introduce the concept of understanding that every team goes through 4 stages. They go through forming, storming, norming, and performing. And you want to get a team to the performing level as quickly as possible. Anytime you switch people off a team, you always revert to the forming. And so, like I said, we have an entire training just around team forming and team performing. And so, but it's important to understand is being able to recognize as a project manager, where's your team? If you're still in the forming after a few days or after a week or 2, what are you doing to get the team to the next level, to the storming, then to the norming, and then to the performing? So we shrink that cycle as quickly as possible. Now, if you have a team that's permanent and they've always worked with each other and they always work well, then that cycle is always going to shrink. But just understanding, because this may delay the entire planning, may delay the progress of the project, especially if people are constantly being rotated in and out. The other thing to understand, and again, I'm just introducing the concept, this is part of the team building training that we do, is also recognize the type of team players that you have. Now, team players do not necessarily equate to personality types, this is more of people have a tendency to play a certain role on a team. And so there are 4 types of team players on a particular team. And this is a trait, once you understand the details of what this entails, that you can adjust and change which one of these roles you play on the team. For a project manager, it's extremely important to make sure you understand, because the project manager is the one that's going to have to play the different roles if there is a gap or if one is missing. So the first one is the contributor. And you'll start to see some alignment with some personality types as well. But the contributor is the task-oriented individual. This is the individual that says, I will provide you all the information you need. I will write whatever script we need to write or code we need to write for software. This is the individual who is down, not just in the weeds, but in the roots of the weeds. Okay, so they're always going to be down at a very detailed level. These individuals are very dependable, very responsible, very organized and efficient, very logical. But the challenge is for this type of team player who's always providing data and providing information, their focus is so far down to the details, they can't see the big picture. That's a contributor. A collaborator is the opposite. This is the goal-oriented. This is the vision person who sees the big picture, but is always seeing the big picture, right? And so this person is willing to pitch in and work and support, but again, they are the big picture. This type of person, very flexible, very confident, forward-looking. The challenge with the collaborator is that they're always focused on the big picture, that end date, but can't see the work that needs to be done today or tomorrow or the details.
Excuse me, Jess.
Pardon me?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Jess, but we have somebody locked out of the Zoom.
Oh, I see.
Thank you.
Thanks. Got it. Thank you. So these are 2 types. So this is the contributor and the collaborator. So the next one is the communicator. And the communicator is very process-oriented. So this is an individual that is very process-oriented, very facilitator type, likes to work on conflict resolution, building teamwork, being informal. This is what I call the touchy-feely person on the team. And so this person is very encouraging, very relaxed, very tactful, very helpful. But on the challenge side, the challenge is the communicator, heavy focus on communicating, getting everybody being touchy-feely is, how do you feel today? That they lose focus of what the project is, and they lose focus of where they're going and the details. And the last one, which is always my favorite, is the challenger. This is the person that is going to challenge the team. They're going to challenge the goal. They're going to challenge the method. They're going to challenge the leader. They're very ethical for the most part. They're very honest. They're very questioning. They could be very outspoken. The challenge with the challenger is that sometimes they just challenge for the sake of challenging. And so if you have a team, think about this. If you have a team made up of all challenges, what's going to happen to the team? They're going to be constantly challenging each other. They're not going to progress. If they're made up of all communicators, everyone is so focused on your feelings, right? Or focused on communicating and the process that we lose sight of when things need to get done. And if we have a collaborator who's only looking, everyone's looking at the big picture, none of the detail work is getting done. And if you have the contributors are all going to be focused on the details and not focused on the big picture. So as a project manager, you need to recognize what role people are playing on the team And you need a balance of all of these. You do need challengers on the team. You need communicators on the team. You need contributors on the team. You need collaborators on the team. And so as a project manager, you need to recognize what type of team player they are on your team. And if you've got a gap and missing, you're going to have to fill that gap, or you're going to have to work with those individuals to shift to one of the other types. But again, just wanted to introduce there's a bunch of other tools in the toolbox as a project manager you should be aware of, and they are related to the team, related to the team player roles, and related to how a team evolves, because as a project manager, your job is to shrink that cycle to get to the performing of that team as quickly as possible. Again, this is just a quick introduction to it. So as part of the startup phase now, we need to gather all the stakeholders. We need to define the reason for the project. What is the problem that we're solving with this project? What is the problem? What is the opportunity? We need to define the objectives of the project. What are the key objectives? We need to identify preliminary risk. We need to determine the feasibility and the potential value of this project. Identify and notify who's going to participate. If you not ready, you need to get every department head to provide you a name of who they're going to provide. Then you need to get those individuals, the supervisors and the managers, notified of what you're going to need. You need to plan the project at a very high level. This is not details, this is not the task, and it is not the only plan you're going to develop. This is at a very high level just to make sure we have an understanding of what the project looks like. We need to understand what that final cost or what that final budget we're going to have to work with. We need to obtain financial approval to say, yes, this is good enough. Once we have the brief, we've identified these things that, yeah, this is the financial plan for that. And then you need to create the actual brief. So the brief itself contains some sort of problem statement. What is this project going to solve? What's the problem? What is it going to solve? What are the key objectives? Back to what I said earlier. Someone in management might have said, we're going to increase our output by 50%. Okay, well, what's our problem? What are we solving with that 50% increase? Okay, and then what are the key objectives that we're trying to achieve? Once we have those, then we can start working on the scope. And remember, the definition of a scope is defining the boundaries of the project. We need to, at least at a very high level, what are the major deliverables? We may have a whole bunch of deliverables, but what are the major ones we need to identify early on so people have an understanding what is the scope? And this goes back to being connected to the scope of work. What is the budget for that project? If it's an internal project, you're going to be looking at what are the benefits, what is the ROI, what is the return on investment. If it's an external project for a customer, it's usually related to revenue. At a high level, what does that schedule look like? When's the start? When's the end date? And maybe some major dates in between. Other things that should be included, right? Not always necessary, but should be included. What roles are the team members going to play on the project? In other words, you'll see we're going to create a team matrix to identify what key roles team members play on the project team. Is there training considerations? This isn't training for the end user, if you're installing equipment, the end user of the equipment. This is what training considerations do we need to put in this plan in regards to the project team. So let's take, for example, I am putting in a new piece of equipment, but there's a whole new software. Does the team understand what that software can do? Does this team understand what that project? So maybe the team needs to be trained on at least what are the operational benefits of this new piece of equipment. If we're talking about coding, for example, if we're going into use a different language or a different operating system, the team needs at least a high level understanding what that is so they can make some decisions about how they're going to plan the project. Resources. When we talk about resources here, what are the key special resources, internal resources, and what key external resources do we need to include? Okay, and when I talk about key internal resources, in many organizations, there may be one person that is so highly specialized, that person's involved in anything that comes through. So they may be a financial person, maybe a software, maybe a sales, but again, what key resources? So everyone understands we're going to have to use this key resource for this project. And here we go again, assumptions, risk, and any open issues that are critical that we need to report out at the very beginning at the first pass. We need to identify that. So this is what the project brief typically consists. There are many forms, and at the end of the class, at the end of the course, I'm going to give you several samples of project briefs and samples of project charters that you're welcome to use, adjust, and change. But typically, this is what's included at the very beginning, and it is at a very high level. So when we talk about problem definition, okay, here's the other thing. We have a whole class just on problem solving, and we spend a large portion of that time just writing a problem statement. The challenge is we've all been conditioned to write a solution into our problem statement. And let me give you an example. We have low revenue coming in, and the problem is that Guy is not bringing in more revenue, okay? So I just identify what the solution is. The solution is Guy. If we fix Guy, we fix our problem. Well, that may not be the reason. So it's understanding that a problem statement needs to be clear, concise. It needs to state some measurable. What is that measurable? It needs to describe a deviation from either a standard, and more often than not, what we find 80% of the time is expectation and not a standard. So what is the expectation? And what is the deviation from that, of what's happening today? What is that deviation? And provide a little bit of background. So it's important that we understand what the problem statement is. Again, we could say we want to increase our output by 50%, but what problem are we solving by doing that? Okay, we got to be clear, concise. What is the deviation from the standard or the expectation? Okay, and provide a little background. So at this stage, some very key activities that have to take place during the startup phase. And that is, we need to document and confirm the scope and high-level assumptions, which is the creation of the project brief. We need to confirm sponsorship, especially if it's an internal project. Who's the sponsor? What's the funding? Okay? How much money can we spend on this project? We have to draft a high-level plan. Now, if you're a project-oriented organization, it's not what is the funding, is, okay, what did we sell it at and what is the margin we have to make on the project? Identify who needs to provide input into the plan and what resources are we going to need. So documents to develop is the project brief / charter, the project scope, some Gantt chart, which is a picture of a timeline, and some resource plan, high-level resource plan, and then a project description. Any questions on that? It's a little bit after 11, so we might end up finishing just a little bit early today. So I'm not going to start the planning phase today. We'll start that on Friday. And at the end of the planning phase, you'll start doing your first exercise. So one of the things that we will do at the end of every session is a reflection. Now, some of you, like Krista, who has participated in some of my sessions in the past, are quite familiar with the reflection. And so every session we'll do a reflection. And the purpose of the reflection is really to understand, number one is to understand what your understanding of the training, and to answer any questions. And if we have to make some adjustments, then we'll make some adjustments. But typically what I ask is, what did you learn today? Number one. Number two, did you have any aha moments on the information that was shared? And number three, is this too much information, not enough information? You don't need to be here. I mean, whatever feedback you'd like to provide, we'll take the feedback. So everyone who's on is going to reflect. And so I first start with asking who wants to volunteer first, and then we're going to do something a little different. I'll let that person then pick the next person. So who wants to volunteer first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think the aha in a lot of these things for me is the fact that this isn't rocket science. You just have to follow a method and use the tools. I mean, I think the biggest problem I've had in the past is you go through all this stuff and you go, yeah, and then you forget it, you set it all aside, put it on the shelf, and then you start your project.
Right.
The old way. So you got to utilize the tools that we learn to do the project. And I have a question.
Sure.
Maybe you said this at the beginning. Is there a way to get a copy of the slides so we could review it?
Yeah, so what you're going to do is at the end of every session, you're going to get copies of the slides that we covered that day.
Okay.
So at the end of every session, you'll get a copy of those.
Great, because I think that's, it's like a quick refresher. You don't have to spend 4 hours or something, but maybe with the team sit down and go, okay, are we going through all the steps? Are we following this procedure like we all agreed to do and it's proven that works?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, and I think I did mention earlier, is the other thing that will happen is because I am recording this whole thing, or at least the presentation piece of it, that you'll get access tomorrow. You'll get a link to it so you can review it if you want to do a quick refresher on it as well. But you'll get both a copy of the slides that we covered today, as well as that link at the end of every session.
Great.
Okay. So, Bill, you get the opportunity to pick on the next person.
Well, I don't know what order you're seeing everybody, but Jamie's right below me. So Jamie, you're welcome.
Well, today, I think my aha moment kind of came with the realization that a lot of project management is good planning and figuring out the infrastructure ahead of time to kind of have a baseline to move forward on. I'm kind of one of those that like jumps in and figures it out along the way. And I think I can really take some cues on being able to anticipate issues that might come up and preparing for those ahead of time. And I think I'm gonna pick Josh.
All right, for me, I think it was more of identifying those people that are going to be involved in the project ahead of time. For us, we typically, someone has an idea or a project that's coming up, and then we just grab the people that we think should be a part of it, rather than making a more formal, hey, this is going to be the team on this, and this is how it's going to work.
And again, we will get into how you should pick who should be on there based on the skills that are needed to perform the work. And so we'll go through how you do that as well. Because you're right, and that's pretty typical, is, okay, you three, you're going to help me out on this project, right? And so this is more of, in order to be more effective and more efficient, is we need the right skills. So we need to find individuals with those skills. And if they don't have the skills, then like I said, part of the plan is we need to develop those skills and train some of our folks to go do that so we can utilize them. Good. So Josh, you get to pick the next person.
Susie.
So what I found interesting was the 14 player part. as Bill had mentioned, we're looking into a big project, and I could somewhat see how, who would be a contributor, who would be the challenger of the people participating in that project. And so I think one of the questions that came up, is it possible for a team player to be multiple
Yes.
of those
Once
styles?
once an individual recognizes what they are and then recognizes what the gap is, they can adjust. And so it's not tied to their personalities, although sometimes the challenger is tied to personality. But for the most part, once they recognize, they can adjust.
Nice. Okay.
And again, there's a whole training class just on that.
Okay. I'll do Chewy.
Thank you, Susie. You stole mine. I actually thought that same thing on the aha moment. It was 4 different team players, and I was kind of doing this exact same thing, piecing out who's who in our organization. And then at the same time, I was thinking, okay, maybe my collaborator is not as detail oriented as you make it out to be, and maybe I need to help him build that so that we can have an effective team member. And overall, just how every single person can collaborate and make it a project successful.
So one thing I haven't heard, is this so far good for you? Good information, sufficient, too fast, too slow? Or?
I think it's good information. A lot of it we already are doing subconsciously, like without even knowing we're doing it. But we're definitely, sometimes we just take on a project without pumping the brakes at first and taking some time going through the problem statement, project description. I mean, my superior sent me a chat saying I'm the project manager, so it was defined today. No, but we all knew that. It was just never actually formally written out, but it was said several times. So we're definitely doing the right things. Maybe not as formal as this training is laying it out.
So one of the things that we often run into, again, like I said, we're all doing some form of project management informally. Okay, we're all doing that. And when you're in an organization or the type of business where is get it done, get it done, get it done, it's hard to stop and think of the structure you need and follow the structure. But the larger the projects get, if we start moving from making dinner to now I'm building a house, if I don't plan it, I'm going to redo a lot of stuff in the process, and that's going to impact both the dollar side and the time side. So the larger the project gets, the more important it becomes to actually sit down and do the planning, because that's going to save you a lot more time. There's an old saying, you have to slow down to go fast. And we preach that a lot in everything that we do. You have to slow down to go fast. So we have to slow down to plan so we can actually go fast for the actual work that has to be performed. And usually that's the bigger chunk of the project anyway. But you got to slow down, you got to plan it so you can go fast in that phase. Otherwise, it's you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and that's how you go, back and forth, zigzagging back and forth. That's the key thing that I hope all of you will get out of the session, is the importance of the planning piece. More importantly, how to do it so you don't spend a lot of time doing it, but still go through the structure and the process to do it.
Right.
Good.
Okay, I'm gonna pick JJ.
I think for me, something that really stood out today was just remembering the importance of IDing and properly utilizing the tools and resources that are available to you based on the scope of your project. and most importantly, not to try and do all of the work yourself, and to use those tools and the people that you appropriately delegate on the project. And then I think something else that really stood out to me that I've seen on some of the projects I've worked on in the past is that people really do have to understand that science that you were talking about, and that also just because you're a good engineer doesn't always, it is true in the fact that it doesn't always make you a perfect project manager for certain things. And I didn't really think of it like that, but after you mentioned it and explained it a little bit, and I thought back at the summer, I can relate to it.
I can tell you that most engineers are probably not good project managers. My own experience as an engineer myself. And so, yeah, but again, it's fully understanding. And again, it's not, I mean, their primary focus and their primary duties are to do this, and all of a sudden they're doing something that they're not really trained or have an actual wanting to do, right? And so they just do it because it's part of their job. So just recognizing this thing is important. And again, you know, the example I use at City of Roseville is there was a couple of guys, they actually decided to try to be project managers. After the first project, they tried to work. It was not a good idea. And eventually the CIO decided to make changes and say, I want to keep all the folks. We're going to have them do other things. They're not going to be project managers, because eventually you recognize that some of these folks a lot of them, there was a handful who just absolutely refused to do it. They said, we quit first before we become project managers. So.
Yeah, one area I want to elaborate on to what Jess is talking about. A lot of organizations identify individuals that are good at doing tasks and activities as then being good project managers. But a task and an activity that relates to like installing a piece of equipment, an inanimate object, as a project manager, you now have to start managing people. And there are people that don't report to you. There might be people that are levels above you, below you, all over the organization. So the detailed aspects of actually identifying a project manager that can actually do tasks and activities and actually manage a team is the hardest part. And that's the part where a lot of organizations fail at assigning project managers, or giving them that title of saying, well, he's good at doing activities, or she's good at doing this or doing that. Well, I think they'd be good at being a project manager. And then you start wondering, well, why are they failing at it? Why are they struggling at it? And that's the whole management of individuals piece and personalities and the cultural side of it.
Okay, you get to pick the next person.
Brad.
So yeah, the light bulb moment for me was kind of looking at some of the lists and descriptions of what a project manager does, and kind of realizing that really is a good team leader, a good manager first, a good team leader. So knowing people, knowing how to get things done, being a good communicator. It's really a well-rounded focus and discipline. It isn't necessarily a technical or a smart side of the business. It's the emotional intelligence and things that require you to be good with interpersonal skills. So, that can come from any discipline or any area. Although Jess, you picked on the finance folks. Project manager really is somebody who can, bring people together and get things done, and really get, it really is what a great manager can do as well. So we're getting good project management skills here, or concepts and ideas, but also it's just a good way to be a good manager too.
Absolutely. And that's a myth and a fallacy that some organizations have, that say, if I'm going to have a project manager and they're heavily engineering or programming, I need to have a programmer who's going to be a project manager, or someone that's operations and a project manager in operation. I need somebody from operations. That's not necessarily true. It's a person who can understand and tap into those other two areas that we talked about, either the application piece or the general management piece. They don't have to be experts in that area, and they don't necessarily have to come from those areas. So absolutely. Good. So Brad, you get to pick the next person.
Let's see, Luke.
Cool, thanks. I think the one thing for me, and it came up because it happened yesterday, is the communication piece. I mean, all this stuff makes sense as far as project management goes. In our business, our engineering team actually does project management very well. They run on sprints. They have a really good director of engineering who has those people skills and does project management very well, but also understands the coding and engineering side. But what I'm taking out of this is more for the other sides of our business with communication. For example, our marketing team decided independently that they wanted to start up a new webinar series and drive people to these webinars. So the director of our marketing team, who was just recently promoted, it's a learning opportunity for him. He's really good at the work. He's really good as a contributor. So we're helping train him into a leadership role. He did he told me he did 18 hours of work or 20 hours of work over the weekend on this webinar thing. And then he brought it to me yesterday, and I run our customer success division. So I had all of our customer facing existing customer business. And I said, Derek, this webinar is great, but why are we sending this to existing customers? They already know all of this information. They've been with us. It was more like a sales webinar. They were running it. And he was like, I just did all this work. And so it was just this whole thing. I was like, there was no communication at all. This would have been great for the company if we would have had communication. Now you need to go back and redo, all the slides and get all the webinar stuff and get the new target markets. So that just really hit the head as we were talking about communication earlier in the slides. And then along with the 4 types of people that are doing it. So that's what I like the best out of so far today.
Good. Yeah. And again, I know, what your programmers do is the Scrum bomb, depending on which tool they're actually using. But yeah, and that is quote unquote project management, but it is at a very focused level, and that it is on a very short cycles. Especially if they're doing agile, it's you typically
we're on 2 week
2 week cycle, right? The 2 week sprint. So yeah, so yes, that usually fits inside the bigger project. And so because that has to be used in a development and design function, you need the small print in order to get the work done.
Yep.
But they're not really looking at the bigger picture, but your department head or your manager, he's looking at the bigger picture. He's looking at what's being fed in, and we can get into details later on that. But yeah, no, absolutely. So it's good. Exactly. And I will have an example of a marketing sales project as we go a little bit further, that one of our clients that, we actually taught entire marketing sales folks project management for that particular reason.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're good at getting the work done.
Yep. Good.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Julie.
Who's next?
I think it's me.
Okay.
I really am going to appreciate being able to use all of the tools to present my project brief using the language that is expected by leadership. And I think that it will lend a lot of integrity to my project, and they'll be hearing things in the order that they expect to hear them. And I think that it will be much better received. And so I'm looking forward to that. I thought that the different personalities for the team roles, we have such a small team, and I feel really lucky that we work together so well. But when I tried to put us into these boxes, it almost seemed like several of us are a little bit schizophrenic. So I think a couple of us are playing a couple of these at a time. So that was pretty interesting.
And it's
But
not unusual.
I'm looking forward to the class. I'm enjoying it.
Good. All right, Julie, you get to pick the next person.
How about Krista?
Thanks. So I think I like the class so far, and the pace seems good. It was nice to have the tie-in with some of the previous team members or leadership training that I've done. It's been a few years. So the forming to performing on your team management. I had a couple ahas. First, we're getting ready to start our upcoming fiscal year and therefore new projects. And I've run projects before, so I'm excited to have the formal structure for how to run these. And already, like, I know I want to improve on communicating around major deliverables this upcoming year. And then another aha I have is, as somebody that has been on teams here for the last couple of years, internally as an organization, I think it'd be beneficial for us to have team member training around being a member on a project. Because I think, like, I forget who said it, but like it's common sense things, but sometimes like it would just help to establish what's your, like, the expectations for you as a member on a project and some of the self-awareness around the different roles or styles that you can contribute. So
Good. You get to pick the next person, Krista.
let's see who, I'm starting to lose track of who hasn't gone yet. Guy, have you gone?
He's last.
Oh, you're last. Okay. Anybody else hasn't gone? Mike O'Brien, have you gone yet?
He's also last.
Okay.
I can go.
You want to go, Brian? Sorry, Mike.
No, Ralph. I
Okay,
can go.
Oh, sorry, Ralph. Go ahead.
No problem. So my aha moment was the priorities, because this projects manager position was just made up recently that I got promoted to, and just having the priorities lined out was my aha moment, because it's my first time running projects and stuff, and then learning what my role is a key, because I'm used to being hands-on on projects, getting it done. And it's kind of hard to step back and just having somebody take over. And so just learning all the new steps and stuff, it's great for me.
Good. Good. You want to pick the next person?
Let's go with Eric Stuckey.
What I picked up from it was this stuff can go for large projects and small projects. It's given me information to work on both. I'm normally at the bottom end where I'm actually doing the physical and not. So now I can see what other people are going through trying to plan the projects. I'm seeing a little bit more the details that I wasn't looking at before.
Good. You want to pick the next person, please?
Rolando.
Yeah, Jeff, this is a lot of good information for the 3 hours that we've been on here. It's going to help us here at this SunWest Milling with Ralph, giving him the support he needs. I don't do any of the project manager either, so I do the hands-on on all the electrical, but it's good information to help out the project manager whenever he needs it.
No, that's good. And that kind of goes back to what Krista said earlier. It's, part of the class isn't just about creating project managers, and because we recognize not everyone in the room is going to be a project manager, but it's important to understand that if you are a team member on a project, is understanding what your role is in supporting the project, the project manager, and supporting the project itself. And so it's important. So we always, when we go into organizations and we do the project management training, it's about having everyone be involved, including those folks that are going to be team members and not project managers, so they understand what to expect. It's back to the understanding, right? If there's an understanding of what the expectations are, it's a lot easier to get through a project.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead and pick the next person.
There he is.
I'm shocked that I'm the one you picked. I think my biggest takeaway here is basically just confirmation of what we've been doing wrong. I mean, we've talked about it internally several times, but the biggest miss we always have is the pre-planning. Every project we've done basically since I've been here has been kind of on the fly engineered. You know, we figure out what we want to do, we buy a ton of material or equipment, and then we decide as we're tearing out old equipment where the new equipment's going to be. I mean, it's bit us several times. We've backtracked, moved equipment a couple of times to try and get it done, you know, the way it'll work right. And so, yeah, this is all just pretty much confirmation of that, the disconnect between the plan and the action. So, yeah, for me, it's going to be a great thing to have kind of a blueprint rather than hit and miss meetings and that sort of thing without real agendas. To have a tool that can specifically take you from step to step, from inception to completion is a huge benefit.
Good, good. I'm gonna be looking forward to your particular project as your team's project, because we'll go ahead and plan a project, one of your projects that you have coming up. So.
Oh, I think we got one.
Good, good. So, do you want to? All right, you want to pick who's next? Pick the next person.
I've totally lost track of who all is gone.
Okay, who hasn't gone? Okay. Go ahead. You're still on mute. You're still on mute.
So one of the things that I was thinking of when we were talking earlier about projects is how the importance of having that project manager kind of defined ahead of time. So currently we're in the process of a project that's been going on for about 7 months, and we're in the final weeks right now. We're actually going to be finishing up September 15th. And about a month and a half ago, there was a big kind of step back because of everything that was still hanging out. And we had a team working together, but with that team, there was the lack of number one direct leadership kind of oversight. And so we kept reporting back to the general manager or the plant manager or the contractors. And part of our problem was there wasn't a whole lot of intercommunication happening. And basically we try and get everybody together to be on the same page, and it wasn't happening. And so when we were talking about in the lecture, the project managers don't have to know each specific little thing,
right?
But they have to know the people, those key individuals.
Yep.
They're going to take care of each of those things and then communicate with all of them and then report back to the team to keep the project moving forward. I got kind of pushed into that project leadership and management because it's really, I was more all encompassing of all the different parts of the project. But that was the one thing that I kind of brought up with them. And then we built a timeline and started sharing it with all the, excuse me, all the vendors. So that stuck out to me.
So good. I mean, and that's the thing is we have walked into organizations where they have project teams and they don't have formal project managers or leaders. And that's the biggest challenge. But you do need someone to take ownership of the whole thing to ensure that the communication is happening and that things are getting done. So that's one of the key things is understanding that projects can be completed on their own without having a project manager. It's just not going to be most effective, not most efficient, and there'll be a lot of redos in the process. So you really need someone to provide either the oversight or to manage that process. And again, it is the managing of the process. More importantly, is the dealing with the people. And that's why, again, there's a misconception that project managers have to be technical experts. They don't need to be technical experts. They really need to be more understanding on the people side and the art of dealing with people, because it is an art. It isn't necessarily a science. Okay, anyone else? Did we miss anyone else? I think we got everybody. Okay, so that's as far as we're going to go today. Kate, is there anything else you need for today? Kate? Kate?
Kate might be multitasking on supporting a couple different at once.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, all right. With that said, like I said, I will get to her the slide deck that we covered today, and as soon as the recording is completed, we'll send the link out so you guys can have access to that as well. And we'll pick it up on Friday. That's right, Friday. And in between, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to send me an email, and I'll be happy to respond to it. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm almost done. I forgot about two individuals. Guy, do you have anything to say? He's over there looking at me like, what about me?
Oh, you saw the desk there through the screen, huh?
Yeah, I saw that.
I just want to reiterate that project management and learning the skills of project management is an art. It takes time, and it takes you failing at it and trying again and failing at it and trying again, just like anything else. Is practice makes perfect in doing it. A key thing to keep in mind too is, as you start to do project management, don't ever make the assumption that those that have sponsored you or asked you to go work on a project know what project management is all about. I found a lot of folks in organizations that are actually pretty good at project management, but they struggle where the organizational side of it or the management side of it doesn't understand what they're trying to do. So you may have to coach and educate not only about the project side of it, about the method and the tool that you're using. So a lot of you have mentioned the idea of having a blueprint for what you do. So we look at it as 80% planning, 20% execution. How you plan comes down to a method, and those methods come down to the tools that we're going to teach you. So I always say to myself in organizations when we're working with companies, if we ever get lost, if we ever get confused on anything, go back to the tools. Always go back to the tools. They're not hard, they're not difficult, but if you stick to the tools, the end result will get you where you need to be.
Mike, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I got a couple things. I like this diversity of the group. There's a lot of different roles, and even though not everything could be applicable to you, you'll be able to pull something out here or there to make your lives easier and a lot better. I really enjoyed the 4 team players, the contributor, collaborator, communicator, challenger. Projects can get done with all different types. The trick is and they'll get done. The trick is to get them done, getting the right people on the right seat of the bus, and really starting to work within your own organization to identify who is which and give them all the tools and opportunities to be successful. And then the last thing is this takes a long time, that from the start to the finish of a project, and really honing in all these tools that we're given. Like for our own business, we spent 18 months just on startup, and it took at least 2 years to get my whole company on board and doing and using all the tools before we moved on to the next one. So, and that's just perfection and repetition. And so stick with it. And I think this is, there's a lot of really good information here that I think Jess is going to be able to provide. So thank you guys.
Okay, I think with that, I think today was a good day, good questions. Everyone was attentive, so that's good. Like I said, we get past today, and yeah, really today, because today was really the lecture day. The rest of the time, you guys are going to be busy, and I'm going to be doing less talking. So you guys are going to be doing the work, and you're going to be doing the talking. So with that is for Friday. There is no homework, so you get a little taste of the tool, Miro tool. You're going to be doing work on Friday in Miro. So just be prepared. You are welcome to go into the what we use today. If you want to play around with the tool, you're more than welcome to go in there. So if you want to learn more about it, you're welcome to do that. And on Friday, when we come back, I will be giving you the actual, there's a different board that we will be using to do the actual work. That's the board that we're going to be used for doing all the work. And we will walk through, because we will, like I said, we are going to break down into smaller teams, and each team is going to have a board to work on for the project that you guys select. All right. And like I said, anything you need in between now and Friday, please feel free to email. You got my number too, so you're welcome to call me as well. All right. Any other questions? Then we're good for today. Hey, we finished 16 minutes early. We're ahead of schedule. That only means we'll fall behind somewhere else. No, we'll keep it under our time. All right. Thank you again, and we'll see you all on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.